So I'm going to read your bio, but I obviously want you to kind of introduce yourself once I do this, because I think it's obviously your personal way of presenting yourself. So Zina is a public speaker. She's a communication coach who educates people on the value of effective communication. Very important. And this is effective communication through conflict. She reinforces the idea that kindness and compassion are real and powerful. She emphasizes the importance of being present in our interactions and intentional with our words and actions. Words are very powerful. We all know that, but some people tend to forget. She talks about perspective and giving back to humanity. Love that. And she is a leader, innovator, serial entrepreneur, philanthropist, and warrior. Listen, I love the whole bio. It's just
Thank
brilliant.
you.
Listen, I love the warrior bit. I think I've got. I'm pretty much a warrior myself. So thank you so much for being here. So Zina, tell me in your words. I like kind of tell me who you are, tell me what you do, and tell me kind of how you help people, which I suppose is in line with your bio, but in your own words.
Sure. So who I am? Well, as mentioned, I started out as a family law mediator. In fact, I didn't want to be an attorney, but because I had gone to law school, the Bar Association had said if I wanted to practice mediation, I needed to get my license. So I've always been very much focused on trying to help families and people and individuals navigate through this crazy life that we live in. And one of the ways I wanted to do that was through communication. And the reason I was born kind of into this, and I say born, is because I grew up in a very high conflict family. And so I learned at a very young age what it looked like to navigate through the emotional landmines that existed in anyone's life at any given time. So I've been taught and born into communication and conflict resolution from a very young age.
Hello, everyone.
What's that?
Sorry, Zina, I just lost you there. I'm not sure if it was everyone. I just lost your connection there for a minute.
Okay.
So,
you have me now?
yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
So you were
what
saying,
was the last thing you heard?
Well, it was pretty much at the beginning when you were saying that you went into mediation, obviously because one of the things you had to become a litigator, a lawyer. So yeah, kind of start more or less from the beginning.
Yeah. So I didn't want to be an attorney. I went to law school to learn that I didn't like being an attorney. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to help families and I wanted to help them outside of the court system. But when I opened up Redefining Divorce, my family law firm in 2009, the Bar Association a few years later came to me and said, if you want to do mediation, you need to get licensed because you have a law degree. And I was like, that's interesting. So I didn't become an attorney until 2017. So I did eventually take the bar and get licensed, but I still haven't changed anything in my practice. I'm still very much a mediator. In fact, I've only been to court once, and that was for a very cursory hearing, but I've never been to court to litigate. I'm not the person you hire if you want to fight with your spouse. That's not my jam. And the reason why is because I grew up in a very high conflict environment where I was constantly aware of and identifying the emotional landmines that existed in my world. And so from a very young age, I started kind of walking into rooms and identifying what's going on, what emotions people are experiencing and how I can kind of mitigate them to get everyone back together. I've been the peacemaker my whole life. So that's what I wanted to take into my role into this world, and how I wanted to give back was I wanted to help people essentially heal their pain and heal the chaos that they were experiencing. And the most important way I found of doing that is by teaching them how to communicate and teaching them perspective, because those two things are very, very powerful and they're very impactful. If we have a positive perspective, we see things in a positive and a bright lens. And if we have a negative perspective, obviously the opposite is true. And communication is really important to me because I think it's the number one cause of every conflict that exists. Primarily because if we don't hear what the person's saying, then we can't appropriately respond to it. And that's when you get the situations of I'm always repeating myself and I'm never being heard. Well, part of the reason is because you're not speaking it the way the listener can hear it. And sometimes the listener just isn't listening. So that's kind of what got me into this path of mediation and then conflict communication coaching, or even just, it's not even conflict communication coaching anymore, I've learned. It's more just communication coaching. It just so happens that a lot of people realize they need help in communication in a conflict.
But that was my question. Do people actually realize that they need help in communication? Because I think that's half the problem. I think half the problem is that, one, people don't know how to communicate, and then they're not aware of the impact of their words. So when do they become aware of this? Is it when conflict happens? Is that when it happens?
It's usually when it's triggered, and you're 100% correct that most people do not understand that they don't know how to communicate. And it does usually come up in conflict. The problem is that most people will point their finger at the other person on why the communication or the conflict is existing, right? It's like, they can't listen to me. They don't do something. They aren't hearing me. They. When in reality, we are all 100% responsible for the way that we engage with everything and everyone. And so if there's a conflict that occurs, it's important that we reflect on our contribution to it. And so I've learned, and I think one of the reasons, in fact, I know one of the reasons I got into family law is because that's where you will find a very high degree of conflict. But it's also where you find like beautiful humans that are so vulnerable and so raw and willing to learn, that you're able then to give them tools and impact them because they don't have any other alternative. They're kind of just like, give me what I need to get through this because I'm out of options.
And is it down as well to the simple fact of not learning how to listen? Because I mean, my experience is when I work with people, is that a lot of the time I can see people aren't listening to me because they've already got their internal dialogue going on, where you can see them thinking the response when you've just literally started saying the first sentence. And my approach to this, and you've obviously got much better techniques than I have, but my approach is I instantly stop speaking. And then by me stop speaking, then I get their attention, then I carry on talking. And totally. I say, look, you're just simply not listening. Just bear with me, listen to what I'm saying, and then we can carry on. And because I'm always very careful of making sure that I give people my 100% focus when they're speaking to me, because I'm looking at their language non-verbally, and I'm also listening to what they're saying and the tonality of what they're saying. So there's a lot of coaching, I suppose, that you provide people with some fantastic necessary skills.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, what you're experiencing and the way that you respond is exactly how I coach people into doing it, right? I created a 9-week training course about how to communicate. And one of the things we talk about is paying attention to the nonverbal cues, because those are 93% of communication, right? 7% of communication is the words that we speak. Everything else is our facial expressions, the way that our mouth is moving, our eyebrows, our shoulders, whether our arms are crossed or our legs are crossed, which direction they're crossed in. It's very intensive work. If you're paying attention and you really want to effectively communicate, like, you have to pay attention to these things. And when you realize that someone isn't paying attention, stop. Because if you keep going, if you try and powerhouse through their wall or whatever's going on in their brain, you're not going to be heard and you're just going to get frustrated. And so I do the exact same thing that you do, Bernardo. I'll stop and say, are you ready? Are you ready for me to speak? Or are you listening to me? Or why don't you share with me what's in your mind right now to get it out of there so that I can speak and you can listen. But you're right. A lot of people listen to respond. They don't listen to understand. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that people are uncomfortable not knowing things. And so it's easier for them to put pre-existing thoughts and notions into their mind and anticipate the response than it is for them to learn new information and not have a quick response immediately, because then it shows that they don't actually know or they haven't heard it before. And that makes people uncomfortable.
Do you work more with couples or families?
So in Redefining Divorce, my family law firm, I work with couples and families.
Okay.
In this coaching thing, I work with individuals, corporations, and graduate students, in fact. And then I have a few clients who are like the 20-somethings who I love them. They're great. But these are the kids who the parents, or the young adults who the parents are hiring me to help them transition either out of high school into adulthood or out of college into adulthood. When they get out of that safe space of the protection of the parents or the education program, they have to like live in the real world. They'll hire me to come in and kind of navigate them and help them find direction.
And out of, obviously you've learned a lot along the way. So what has been kind of, I'm not saying because there isn't a common denominator, there isn't always one, there's multiple common denominators, but what would be kind of like, what have you learned, or what have you brought from this journey that you've been on becoming who you are today?
Yeah. So the first thing I learned is that we don't know what people are going through ever, even when they're sitting in your office and they're verbalizing to you what they're experiencing. There's so much history and individuality to people that come from the day they're born until the day they get into their marriage, or they get in front of me, or they get into a conflict. There's so much history, and a lot of people don't even know it. And so I've learned that a lot of people will assign their responsibility for conflict onto their current situation, when in fact it goes way back into the parents, the way that they were trained how to communicate, their understanding of the world, their perspective of how things go. And that's what brings them to the present place. So the first thing I've learned is that we don't know what people have gone through, even when they're in front of us, because they sometimes don't know. And the second thing I've learned is that if you treat people with kindness and compassion, and you have empathy, and you just are simply there to be of service to them, you're just there to help and listen and guide where possible, a lot of positive things come out of that, and a lot of growth is found in that, because most people just want the space. They just want the space to figure it out and get the tools.
And do you think with couples in particular, obviously, I don't know. I mean, I think our parents and grandparents, you know, they got married and they lived forever, happily ever after. And
Something like that.
but something like that. And then even my generation, I don't know, I mean, you know, kind of, it was a bit more common to spend 20, 30 years with someone. I mean, now, hey, if you do 6 or 7, well, first of all, if you get together with someone, did you think that people are now, do you think people have less patience, that they're actually simply, okay, this has happened, we're not compatible anymore, you know? So kind of, okay, you're there to help them, to assist them, for them to be able to communicate, to build bridges, but are they interested in building those bridges? What's your experience in what you do now? Because obviously you must have seen a lot of things change in these last few years.
So, I mean, I think that I think that there's a general rule that people are impatient. And that's probably because of technology. Everything's become so quick. It's become so easy. Anything you want, it's just one click of a button and it's there, right? There are so many different ways to find joy. Why stay in a relationship where you're not happy? I think that's the general idea. It's like, I can go find someone that's going to make me happy if you aren't. The problem with that is that it's not that person's job to make that individual happy. That's that person's job, right? So no matter where you go, no matter what box you check, or whoever you date or whoever you marry, you're going to run into the exact same problems because you haven't addressed them yet, because they aren't about the other person. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people are impatient, but they're not just impatient in relationships. They're impatient in communication. They're impatient at work. They're impatient on the freeway. They're impatient everywhere because things have become too quick. And I also think that we have seen that our grandparents, you know, and ancestors have gone through these long-term marriages where they were unhappy, arguably, right? Like, who wants to be married to someone after 65 years and not talk to each other and fight and bicker all the time? Like, what is that all worth to you, you know? And so I think to a large extent, while we're impatient, we've also evolved into knowing what that looked like, why it was necessary, you know, socially and economically, why it was necessary to maintain that long-term relationship, even if it wasn't positive, and understanding that we're not in that space today, and that we do have options and alternatives. And we're not, you know, financially, we're not in a situation where the woman stays home all the time and the husband's out working. We have dual income earning homes now, you know, and so the need, I think, the great need has been removed. There's still a need, but it should be more of an emotional and spiritual need than it is financial. And that's what I think it is today. But when that emotional or that spiritual need gets compromised because they can't communicate, or because relationship breaks down, it's easier to just bounce and, you know, find someone else that will be shiny and pretty, and they won't have the same issues with them that it is to stay and learn how to navigate through this one.
And obviously it has an impact in your health, doesn't it? And keeping things in, or being in this permanent place of stress and pulling and pushing. But what's your experience with that?
Yeah, you know, I tend to think, and it's not just me, there's a lot of research that's been completed on this, but I tend to think that the emotional response and the emotional condition of a human will dictate their physiological or their body's response. And so I think that a lot of cancers, a lot of diseases, a lot of mental diseases that we have are directly related to our emotional state.
Absolutely.
A lot of people will say it's the food and the hormones and all that stuff. No, it's the way that your brain is thinking. It's the way that you're interpreting information. So if you can imagine, like, I'm sure at some point in all of our lives, we've all had a negative perspective. We've been in a state where just nothing is working. And so everything we see is gray, or it's sepia, or it's, you know, it's turned into a non-bright, non-healthy, non-positive color and energy. Well, when you harbor that inside yourself long enough, your body physically starts responding. You stop eating well, you stop sleeping well, your brain starts going cuckoo. Over time, you know, everything's going to start breaking down. And so when you hold on to the angst, and this is what I tell my clients, both my coaching and my divorce clients, it's like when you holding on to anger is like drinking poison, trying to kill the other person. And that wasn't my quote. I forgot who quoted that, but it was brilliant because it's true. The longer you hold on to something because you think it's going to injure the other person, it's not going to. It's just going to cause a whole bunch of nonsense inside of you that we can otherwise do without.
Well, and there's several and many examples. No, I'm a great believer that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, anything and everything we do is energy. And we've all experienced, you know, being in a room and all of a sudden Mr. Negative walks through the door and all of a sudden you see the light disappear, the sun goes away, and all of a sudden go, oh my God. And that happens, you know, you can feel energy, you can feel positive energy, you can feel negative energy. And I think a lot of, and this is proven now, you know, the psychosomatic, you know, pains that we have in our body many times come from our thoughts and from our negative thoughts. And I'm a great believer. One of my favorite hashtags is #NoNegativity. But I think kind of it is, and it has to be around communication. And if not, just asking yourself the tough questions.
Yeah. And it's also about perspective, you know, it's like, we've been seeing there's always the, you know, the hero and then like the negative Nancy that is in every Disney movie or movie. There's always going to be like the villain and then the hero, you know? And so we've been seeing this dynamic our whole life. And you know that the villain always goes down and the hero always survives for the most part. But that's an illustration of what we go through every single day. And I'm not sure why people don't necessarily pay more attention to it. But if we're walking around thinking that everything's negative, then everything is negative. And the part of this that is the most interesting for me from a psychological perspective is we spend so much time focusing on the negativity and everyone else that we forget that it's actually completely in our control. We just don't want to assume it. We want to make sure that they understand that they're wrong and it's their fault I'm feeling this way, when in fact it's you.
Absolutely. And I think I've been talking a lot about that in either our legacy clubs or kind of where I'm coming, or the conclusion that I've come to is that it is really, again, down to love, you know, and I think, you know, love is manifested in many different ways, you know, through kind words, through expressing or saying nice things, complimenting. And this is where I was going to ask you, okay, so we've got two scenarios here. You've got, and I want to talk about business as well, but let's talk about the couple. Okay, we're going through a bad patch. It's a 7-year itch. I don't know if it's over there in the US, but you know, the 7-year itch.
It's everywhere.
So, okay, good. Okay, so it's an international, global thing. The 7-year itch.
I think it's a 5-year itch now, but yeah, 7 years.
Was it down to 5 probably, and it'll be 3 in a couple of years anyway. But if it's a 7-year itch, okay, so you get the couple, they get together, and obviously you get those couples that are saying, hey, look, we're still going to fight for this, yeah. And I suppose obviously a lot of what you do is, there's many things you do, but I'm saying is bringing love into the room, isn't it? I mean, you know, just trying to bring back those moments and emotions and those beautiful moments that they had that got them originally to fall in love and become a unit.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't actually get a lot of people that come to me and say, we want to try and make this work. And this is how becoming a communication coach actually started. So when I started Redefining Divorce in 2009, a lot of the clients that were coming in started reconciling, which was interesting because I would put them in counseling with amazing counselors. So when I first opened up, I interviewed 750 marriage and family counselors, and I found 5 that I wanted to work with. So I worked with those 5 counselors very intensely with my couples. So we would weave in the legal process with the counseling because it was important for me that they resolved the emotional divorce as they were resolving the legal divorce, because I didn't want their remarriage or their children to be impacted negatively. And so after about the 4th year, so this would take us into 2013, I had about a 74% reconciliation rate. And I was like, huh, this is a trip. Where is this coming from? So I started talking to my clients and I said, listen, it's not uncommon to go into counseling during a divorce. Like, that's pretty mandated generally if you have kids. What's uncommon is that you guys decided to reconcile. So where was this? Because I wanted to keep doing it, obviously. If it was a therapist I was working with, I wanted to bring them on. If it was something else, I wanted to replicate it or duplicate it, because that's really cool. And so they said, Zina, you are the reason we are reconciling. You taught us how to communicate. When we came to your office and we were out of our mind, you literally told us to stop talking and just to listen to you. And then you went on to tell us these stories about how our perspectives are what was negatively impacting, and how after time, negatively impacting the relationship, and how after time, the walls start getting built because no one's listening to each other, and everything we say isn't getting heard. And so we're getting more and more pissed off. And over time, you just can't penetrate that wall anymore. It's there because you cannot see straight at that point, right? And so the only result that you can do is just fold it and just walk away, right? So that's the perspective they have coming in. And they would say to me, but you taught us how to listen, to understand what our partner was saying. And whenever we said something or we responded and we're like, we're defensive, you would correct us and say, that's not what you heard. Like, so I would say to them, that's not what I heard come out of his mouth, or that's not what I heard come out of her mouth. What I heard was, and then I would deliver it and they would be like, huh, interesting, Or they'd say, you haven't been in our marriage. You don't know. He's trying to poke me right now. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? Like they get so focused on the very minimal nominal issues over time that it just explodes the relationship. So apparently I was really good indirectly at teaching them. Well, I guess it was directly. My intention wasn't necessarily to teach
directly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was directly. But my intention was to help them navigate through a compassionate and civil divorce with a great deal of love, because they still are a family, even when you separate.
Thank you. And that's very interesting. And that's a big percentage, by the way.
Thanks.
Big percentage. So well done. But that brings me to the next part, which obviously is, hey, I can't stand her anymore. Okay. I can't stand him anymore. I'm off. And get me out of it. Okay. So again, kind of, you must have experienced, I can only imagine, and this is me looking from the outside. My personal experience is kind of, I've separated recently and luckily, it's amicable. But, kind of, I've just seen so many couples that are just so bitter and so angry and so hurtful. And in many cases, a lot of them falling ill because of that hatred that they have. Yeah. And my question always is what happened to the love? Because at the end of the day, one of the things that I believe is that I don't believe love ends. I just simply believe that love transforms and love becomes a different reality. It's simply a different type of love. Or that's what it should be. Love, and I get it that sometimes I should believe there's a very thin line between love and hatred. I get it. All of a sudden, I love you. No, I hate you. And I get it. But why does that happen? Why and how do people all of a sudden go, hey, we were together for 15 years. We had a marriage. We had 2 beautiful kids, but now I hate you. Why does that happen?
Well, it's not all of a sudden.
Well, not everyone, but I mean, a percentage, isn't it? And what you'll probably give me more facts. What percentage would you say?
The percentage of people who one day wake up and decide that they hate their spouse versus love their spouse.
Yeah, that's it. We're divorcing, and this is going to be as until they come to you, until they come to you, and obviously, hopefully, you make the transition a lot more clearer and hopefully more amicable.
I think the percentage is 0, quite honestly. I don't think that people wake up one day and their heart shifts, like, unless there's some compelling extraneous reason, which I haven't seen. What happens in my experience is one spouse will start the process of detaching from the relationship years before they get to me. And the most interesting part is when they get to me, that the spouse that has no idea it's coming is like, I had no idea it was coming. And I'm like, well, that's telling you something. The fact that your spouse detached and you had no idea is very telling on why your spouse likely detached. because you're not paying attention, right? So I don't think the love is gone. I think the love has transformed. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of miscommunication that goes on that forces people into their pain, into their defense mode from all of their historical experiences with communication, right? And so it's not just they're upset. It's they're upset because they've seen the pattern before, and now they're linking the pattern to this experience, and they're linking it to that person, then they're linking it to that. And so by the time it gets back to this individual, there's like 15 years attached to whatever miniature conflict they just had, because people don't work through the issues that they've experienced, not issues, that the tools that they've learned throughout their life. They don't reevaluate them to make sure that it still works for them. They kind of just stick with them and say, this is it. Okay. But even, this is a very prevalent issue in corporations and the employee-employer relationship. Like it's human, right? We don't communicate. We don't express. We're nervous to express things like, I don't like it when you treat me like that. When you say that to your boss, you're nervous you're going to get fired, or you're nervous your boss is going to take money away from you, or they're going to take jobs away from you because, that's the repercussions that you're afraid of. But the reality is you're going to go to work every single day, get your teeth kicked in, get mistreated, assuming that's the circumstance, right? And then you're going to do this for how long before you actually get sick? Before you actually have a heart attack, before you actually have a stroke? Like, what is it worth? Why not just voice your opinion? And if your boss fires you, let him fire you. There are other opportunities if you believe that this is like what you're supposed to be doing. There are other opportunities for you.
Interesting. Well, I think what you do is obviously very interesting. It's so necessary. Words, communication, that perception of what you're doing and helping people on this journey, on this transition that they go through is very exciting and very needed. Now, what advice would you offer someone that, for example, that is very interested in focusing on kind of moving on or improving their life? What kind of advice would you provide someone for that?
If you have any interest in moving forward or moving into your best self and getting out of your current state, I encourage you to act now. Now is the time, right? We're going to think about it over and over and over again, and we're going to paralyze ourselves thinking about it. If you want to make a change, if you want to learn how to improve your relationships professionally and personally, now is the time to act on it, because there isn't a better time. That's what I would say.
Perfect. Well, that's great advice. And we're delighted to obviously have you speaking at the Expo. And Zina, so first of all, tell us why did you want to get involved in the Expo, and what will you be sharing there?
Yeah, so I wanted to get involved because the Expo is called The Best You, and I love the concept of being the best you. And so in my journey becoming the best me and helping other people become the best them, I was very excited to support this. And I know there's going to be just stellar talkers about them being in their best you form, and then also showing people and telling people how they got there. So I will be doing the same thing in the capacity of teaching about empowerment and health, kind of like we talked about. So the empowerment part is just speaking your truth, understanding where you're coming from, and living authentically. And then the health-wise is, understanding that your perspective is dictating how your world looks. And if you are going to blame everyone else and think it's everyone else's responsibility for the way that you feel or what you're experiencing, then you aren't going to be living your best self, and you are likely going to get sick at some point, and it's totally avoidable. So I think you guys should come to this event. It's going to be awesome. You're going to hear all kinds of incredible speakers give you amazing little nuggets that you wouldn't get otherwise, that you can take with you and just empower yourself and live the best you.
Thank you. And one of the things I'll add to that is that my experience in having put a few events together now and having so many people attend, what happens is that there's just nothing like, engaging, communicating face to face with individuals. I mean, there's, in a time when we've got so many methods and forms of being, communicating, Zoom, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, text messages, WhatsApp, or whatever, I just feel that, we're less and less engaged with individuals. And there's nothing like connecting with people. There's nothing like talking, listening, and really engaging. But I think what you're bringing is extremely exciting, necessary, from any and every aspect, from a personal point of view, for those that obviously are seeking for love, for those that maybe are already married, or maybe those that are transitioning, but also from a business point of view, you know, kind of communication is one of the most key and important things. What is the title of your talk? What is the title of your talk?
I haven't created one yet.
You haven't created one. Okay, cool. Well,
part of the reason is because I like to do my talks pretty authentically. And so as I learn new things and information come to me, I want to be able to modify and edit it. So I don't really like to put myself in a box, but there's been a few variations.
Listen, I'm the same. I don't normally prep. I mean, I know the title of my talk, which is based on my book, which is The Question, boom, done. But when it comes down to the day, it will vary very, very much, depending on how I feel. And I think there's something, and obviously you've got many things and you've got it as far as a communicator, whereby you're going to be expressing beautifully whatever it is you're going to be sharing on the day. And I'm sure people are going to get some fantastic golden nuggets. So please, I want to recommend anyone and everyone to come and see Zina. This obviously is also, apart from this webinar today, will be a recorded podcast. So I hope you can join us in any, the Expo in LA, if you listen to it between now and then, and if not, you join us in any of the others. So Zina, how can people find you? Please share your webpage and social media and so on.
Yeah, so my webpage is zinabgleason.com. My social media handles, you can get me on Instagram at Zina_B_Gleason. Facebook is Zina B. Gleason. LinkedIn is Zina B. Gleason. And we will also, if you go to zinabgleason.com, you can actually find all of the links to me. And if you want to reach me directly, you can email me at zina@zinabgleason.com, or you can call my cell phone at 562-230-1528.
Well, thank you so much. Two very last questions for you. What is one of the most exciting things that you're experiencing or learning recently?
That people can change.
Yes. That's very true. And many years from now, what would you like your legacy to be? We're very fond of the word legacy. What would you like your legacy to be?
My legacy will be that the kids of our generation and upcoming generations will learn how to communicate and hopefully eradicate war and gangs and drugs and violence and mental disease and cancers and all that.
Well, that's a beautiful legacy to leave. Zina, thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking to you. It was brilliant. And I look forward to seeing you at the Expo. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care. All the best.